let's go into our do not draft top 3 list here. Don't draft him. Let someone else make the mistake, okay? And Cody, I was telling you as we were messaging on our Marco Polo this week, I always do this in my head when I'm at a draft. Any draft I'm at, I always have usually I have 10 guys, to be honest. Yeah. But I have these guys in my head where okay, I'm not going to get them. If they drop in 4 rounds and they're still there, then I'll think about getting them. But, I usually have a list in my head of guys I'm not going to even mess with because I've either been burned by them before, I see them consistently dropping, but yet the media is talking about how good they are still or whatever. So those are guys that I definitely try and avoid. So this is one of those topics that I really, really like doing. So Cody, I'm going to let you kick it off here. Who is your first do not draft player?
First do not draft player for me, it's actually my favorite quarterback, because I said he was top 10 years ago, Ryan Tannehill. As I mentioned when we did our, I think it was our AFC South predictions, I think.
I hate you.
I said that the Ryan Tannehill experiment was over. I believe that's true. I think he's going to have a lackluster season. He doesn't have the offensive weapons he had last season. Yes, they have Robert Woods, and I can't even remember the receiver that they draft. I think that Ryan Tannehill is going to have a struggle. It's going to be a pressure-type season for him. I do see Malik Willis being placed in the starting lineup because I think what will end up happening is the Titans are going to get to a point where they're out of playoff contention, out of wild card contention, because in my opinion, if the Titans don't finish with 11 to 12 wins, they're not getting into the playoffs because I think the Colts are better than them, and I think every other team in the AFC, specifically out of the West, will probably have a better record than the Titans. So the Titans, I don't see them getting a wild card. And I think what will end up happening is at some point in the season, maybe it's a little bit past halfway, I see the Titans making a quarterback change because they're out of contention and they want to get Willis the experience, the starting reps, and go from there. So I would say if you are, somebody that is a Ryan Tannehill fan, don't draft Ryan Tannehill. Avoid him. Let somebody else take him. I don't think he's the quarterback that you guys want to go for this upcoming fantasy season.
I'll stick with the theme of the quarterbacks. I am going to go my overrated or do not draft list is going to go with Dak Prescott. I'm over Dak. Okay? I'm over him. Listen, I like him as a dude. I think he's a really solid quarterback. Listen, no one thought he was going to be what he ended up being. Not saying he's a terrible quarterback. Not saying that at all. But I think he is a little overhyped. I don't think he does what everyone says that he's doing. Is he a great leader? He's absolutely a great leader. He is a guy that you want on your team. But you are not going to be successful when you lose your best receiver last year. Amari Cooper was their best receiver. I mean, what? He had 8 touchdowns? What are you going to replace that with 8 touchdowns? You just lost who was it? James Washington? He was supposed to replace that 8 touchdowns. I mean, maybe he could have, but I mean, he's not going to be as effective as what Amari Cooper was. And Cooper was out earlier in the year. So I just want to say that Dak Prescott, as much as I like him as a guy, I don't think he is a fantasy option. I think he at best is going to be a backup quarterback for you in fantasy football. Listen, Ezekiel Elliott has gone way downhill. Tony Pollard has been playing better. Now that offensive line is getting worse. And now you've lost, like I said, Amari Cooper. You're really relying heavily on CeeDee Lamb and Dalton Schultz. And I like CeeDee Lamb. I'm not saying he's terrible. And I'm not saying that the Cowboys aren't going to win games. We already did the NFC East. But I will say this, Dak Prescott, he's going to be under pressure a lot more. And from what I have witnessed and what I have watched on film, he is not a guy who likes the pressure. You can say that about every quarterback. I get it. But listen, there are guys who don't like pressure but can still make throws. And Dak Prescott, to me, is not really one of those guys. He is a guy who would rather just throw it away, which is usually good. But when you need a first down on third down, he is a guy who just kind of gives up on a play, unfortunately. And now he tries to run a lot still, and it's like, dude, you've been hurt before. You can't really do it as much. And it's unfortunate to see because I think he's a really good guy. He's a great leader, like I said. So Dak Prescott for me, do not draft this year.
My second player to avoid. Now, this player had a breakout season, respectfully, last season with a really terrible team in the Atlanta Falcons. And I'm talking about Cordell Patterson. I don't think he's going to duplicate the same fantasy production, the same target share, anything like that in this upcoming season. I think with a change in quarterback, obviously change in the offense, I don't see him being the feature player or like the Deebo Samuel type player. He is getting a little bit older. I see injuries kind of maybe derailing that. He's a fine player. I mean, he was a Raider once before as a return specialist, and he was great. He even had a couple of great touchdowns when Derek Carr was throwing him the ball, but I don't see him carrying that same production as last season, because last season he carried a lot of folks to the championship, and I just don't see that happening again. So I'm going to say Cordell Patterson is a player you guys are going to want to avoid this season.
I'm actually going to go with, and you know what, I'm kind of surprised that I'm saying this, but I feel like it is because of who his quarterback is. I'm going to go with Deontay Johnson. I'm not going to draft him this year. You have Mitchell Trubisky. You have his younger version in himself, Kenny Pickett. I have no, and then, or Mason Rudolph. Listen, I think Deontay Johnson is a good player. I'm not saying that it's one of those things where I'm not saying he's a terrible player, but I do think he benefited from whether you listen, I was a little bit higher on Ben Roethlisberger than he ended up being. I think you were a lot lower on Ben Roethlisberger than what he ended up being. I think, he kind of ended up in the middle of what we thought. But say what you will about Ben Roethlisberger. Yeah, he really didn't have an arm anymore, and he was kind of breaking down as a player. But overall, he's still a smart quarterback. He knows where to throw the football. With Mitchell Trubisky, I think he's good. I think he's fine. But what we saw with Trubisky in Chicago was if he doesn't really have his go-to guy, or really doesn't have, a great offensive line, he's not going to be very great. I mean, he's not what you need. He's an okay starter. He can get you through a year if you need him. He can be that bridge quarterback, which is what I think they're going to be doing. And I think with that, Deontay Johnson is not going to be fantastic. I mean, his first year with Pittsburgh, he wasn't, he didn't really get too much. He was still targeted quite often. He was targeted 92 times in his rookie year in 2019. And then in 2020, played 15 games, 88 catches, 144 targets, 923 yards, 7 TDs. And then last year with a Ben Roethlisberger who not great, had 107 receptions, 169 targets, 1,161 yards, and 8 touchdowns. And that is, like I said, with a breaking down Ben Roethlisberger. So you're going from Ben Roethlisberger, who, say what you will, he's one of the smarter quarterbacks in the NFL, and now he's gone. And now you're going to Mitchell Trubisky, who was a backup last year in Buffalo. I mean, I don't know. I'm going to stay away from Deontay Johnson. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, and I'll live with it. But to be perfectly honest, I feel like I'm on the right side on this one. I really don't like Deontay Johnson this year. I'm going to stay away from him in all leagues.
So the third player that I would recommend that you avoid drafting, this is actually continuing with receiver. And ironically, I also wrote down Deontay Johnson as one of mine too, but I'm not going to, hold on, I'm not going to use him. This receiver I think that everyone should avoid, at least in this season, is DK Metcalf of the Seattle Seahawks. The reason why is simply their quarterback play, their offensive line. It is atrocious. I would not sacrifice a draft pick on DK Metcalf or on Tyler Lockett, but specifically DK Metcalf. He's a young receiver. He will probably show some flashes, and he will get some stats. I'm not going to say that he'll never catch a pass or anything, but if you're going to spend a third or a fourth round pick, maybe even a fifth round pick at the latest to get DK Metcalf, save that, get a different receiver. If Allen Robinson is still hanging out there, I would choose Allen Robinson over DK Metcalf. I think that's a way better value for your pick. But I would avoid DK Metcalf. Who's throwing him the ball? Either Drew Lock, who had a pretty good receiving core in Denver, in Sutton, Patrick, even Judy in his rookie season, couldn't do nothing with them. Geno Smith has been in the league for numerous amounts of years, and he has not panned out. I think he's just been in Seattle because he's another mobile quarterback. He's been in Pete Carroll's offense for a long time. But even when he filled in for Russ during Wilson's injury, he wasn't very effective as a passer. He wasn't fantasy relevant. I think he finished a couple of games in the negative. So I would avoid DK Metcalf. He's not going to be worth a late round draft pick. If he goes undrafted or he's on the waiver, take a flyer if you want to week, but I'm not wasting a draft pick on him with the situation that's going on in Seattle. So that would be my third player to avoid in this draft.
Are you kidding me? Drew Lock is the truth, buddy.
Right.
No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Drew, yeah. Yeah, exactly. I just need some gum. Anyway, no, I agree with you. Last year I was kind of off of DK because he's kind of that big game play, and if he doesn't get that, 70-yard touchdown or whatever, he's got great speed. Yeah, he's kind of, his hands haven't been great. I think he did really benefit from Russell Wilson though, and I got to shout out Backseat Podcast because they've been kind of trashing Russell Wilson. They're putting him at like 11, which I think is absolutely insane. I mean, say what you will, but Russell Wilson is a winner. I mean, this guy. Yeah. Look at what we're saying about the Seahawks when Russell Wilson left. They went from like a 7-9, 7-10 team to like everyone's like maybe 3 wins. Are you kidding me? So Russell Wilson, come on, let's give him a little bit of respect. I mean, he's borderline top 5, if not in your top 5. I don't see how not. But anyway, neither here nor there. I would agree with you on that. My third and final guy is actually, I think this might surprise a lot, JCJ. I appreciate your question, by the way. I hope we gave you valid information, and I hope it doesn't screw you. Watch, Kamara's gonna get hurt, and he's gonna be like, "God dang it!"
No kidding. He's got to remember this.
Anyway, I'm gonna go with Saquon Barkley. I'm not touching him with a 10-foot pole because I don't trust him anymore. His rookie year, he was phenomenal. Over 1,300 rushing yards, 11 touchdowns. What did he do in the following year? He got hurt, missed 3 of those games, barely got to 1,000 yards. He was 3 yards over 1,000 yards, and he only had 6 touchdowns. And then in the average is what was worrisome to me. Mm-hmm. He went from a 5.0 average in his rookie year to a 4.6, which is still good. I mean, I'm not saying that's trash, but you got to put it in perspective of he had a lot fewer attempts, and he was injured for 3 of those games, and a lot of those games towards the end really didn't matter in the Giants. Then you talk about 2020 year, which was, listen, it was only 2 games. He had 19 attempts, but his average was 1.8. Yes, he got injured, but he was not injured before those numbers came up. So what I'm saying here, and he had no touchdowns in those 2 games. Now, he got hurt, obviously, I think it was early in the second game, but it was a little worrisome already. Then last year, he came back off of injury, still got injured again, missed 4 games there, and only had 593 rushing yards. His average was a 3.7, which is still okay, but he only had 162 attempts and 2 touchdowns. He was not who he had been. So, in my opinion, Saquon Barkley, I'm not trusting him. He's not a great pass catcher either. He doesn't put up big numbers. His first year, again, he did. His first year, he caught 91 catches. His second year, he only caught 52, and he only missed 3 games. That's that's almost 40 passes. That's 39 passes that you all of a sudden just lost in 3 games.
Yeah. That's
a huge number. And then last year, he only had 41 catches. And granted, yes, I understand, it's Daniel Jones. How can you? Okay, but that's my point. We're talking about this year. If Daniel Jones is your quarterback, I'm not touching Saquon Barkley. And to be honest, that offensive line isn't really making me, lick my lips here. It's mediocre at best right now. I just don't think Barkley has what he had before his injury.